friend of mine. Hey, Raymond, you get enough beer for Ben, too. What kind of beer do you like? Heineken. Heineken? Fuck that shit! Pabst Blue Ribbon!
What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me again. Today we're getting into something incredibly special again. Shout out to my Dove video and Henry Wilson, because he hooked me up with Dan Cavity of the infamous Florida band Cavity. As you can see, thanks Dan, shout out. I'm working on Dan's personal Peavey Combo 300. Dan's the bass player for Cavity. Cavity's been a band since about early 90s, 92. They were extremely heavy, extremely sludge-induced, depressive kind of doom, which is really, really sick. But Dan personally dropped this off to me to get it worked on. He said he bought it brand new in 92, and it has been used on all the Cavity recordings, which is really insane. I mean, if you really think about all the different places that this amp has been, all the different writing sessions, practices, and just all the history that is, you know, held within this crazy amplifier. So on a side note, I personally love the Combo 300 because I had a Peavey Max, which was a Combo 300 preamp sandwiched with a CS 800 inside of a flight case. Basically, I think it came out in the early 80s. It was supposed to be like maybe Peavey's answer to the new Super Festival series. Basically, it could run 400 watts on two different sides at 2 ohms, basically. So it was an 800 watt solid state absolute monster amp, weighed like 85 pounds, 80 pounds. I used it for a while in a Screamo project I was in, and a little bit in another project I was in, another sludge kind of doom grind band that I was in. And it just turned out to be too heavy, so I let it go. But I always missed that sound. So the Combo 300 is the exact same preamp. So what we're gonna do for Dan is something I've personally wanted to do for myself. I wanted to buy one of these Combo 300s, rip out the amp itself, work on it, make sure it's totally good, and then build a head shell for it and have just a really, really sick Peavey bass head. So this puts out 210 watts at 4 ohms and then 300 watts at 2 ohms. It is a pretty simple preamp for the most part, but it's interesting because it has that is an 8-band EQ on there, a crossover. It has a lot of the switching for the effects loop. It has a high and low input or high and low output, and then it also has a preamp out, power amp in the front. And then what's cool about these is that these gain controls are push-pull. So the preamp gain, if you pull it, it pulls it bright. And then if you pull out the post gain, it becomes punchy and loud. So basically it's just more of a resonant low end, and it gets into the kind of the subsonic bass. And then it kind of boosts the mids a little bit too. Just, you know, Peavey are known for that really skronky and kind of boomy mids. So it's perfect with a 15 like this. I believe this is a Black Widow Peavey. So what we're gonna do is rip the amp out of the head shell, or rip the amp out of the combo. My buddy James from Boonand, as you saw before, he created the Crate 1600 XL head shell. So we're gonna do the same thing for Dan. We're going to make this into a cab. I don't know if we're gonna build a custom cab. I think he wants 215, so James might utilize this to make a extra cab and then build him another additional cab that he can have on top of this one, and then that way he can have the Combo 300 amp itself separate as well. So this only has an external one external speaker jack, and then it has an internal speaker connection to this to run at the full, I believe this might be an 8 ohm speaker, so it's probably going to run at 4 ohms if you run another 4 ohm or another 8 ohm cab. So we're going to go ahead and separate that, and then I'm going to add an additional speaker jack as well to make it fully functional with 2 speakers and get that full Peavey tone out of it, just in a more portable case, because in a more portable situation, because this itself, I mean, it sits at maybe 3 feet tall, 3.5 feet tall, and then it also just weighs, I mean, 85 pounds, 90 pounds. So it takes up a good space, and it's not very portable. So we're gonna go ahead and hook Dan up, and we're gonna get this back to its glory. Oh, it was also blowing fuses, so probably just gonna start with a capacitor job, get it cleaned up, and you know, replace some integral resistors, and most likely that usually takes care of it. So let's go ahead and get started with the work and see what it looks like on the inside. All right, this is the inside of the Combo 300. Mind you, I've never opened one either, so this is all of our first time seeing it. So relatively, it looks pretty clean. Obviously, you know, for being a one-person owner or a one-owner amplifier, it was pretty well taken care of. I see it, you know, it probably just wore out, and I'll show you what happened, or what I believe what happened. It's pretty simple, honestly. Preamp board looks good. So we do have back here, we do have the actual pots mounted to a board. That definitely needs cleaning. You know, a lot of flux, a lot of overheating. But either way, just some work, you know, basically regular maintenance. Pretty good for 30 years. I mean, 33 years or however long it's been. So this is the power board here. All right, and then let's get into what I believe would have happened, or some symptoms, at least. It looks like these were just completely cooking or something. So those caps definitely went bad. That diode is completely shot. It looks like the diode maybe have exploded, and then same thing with here. This one is just completely melted. Oh, these caps. Okay, here we go. I see now. So these caps have like wax or some kind of coating on them that when you pull them out, you can even feel it on your fingers. It's some kind of substance, but it looks like those caps overheated and started melting, literally, and disintegrating, and then that just started blasting current through the amplifier. And then I'm trying to see here on these diodes, the legs of these diodes, maybe some kind of sign of overheating, but yeah, you can thoroughly see that this is a total mess. But that will get cleaned. But these main power caps look pretty good. They were mounted straight to the board, just like this Peavey Citation that I have here. That also has large power caps. I think exactly the same ones. I believe they're 5000s. However, kind of the same setup, to be honest, just on a larger scale. But here we have the transistor board mounted upside down. That definitely needs to be cleaned. That just is completely looking a little ragged for sure. And yeah, those resistors are going to need to be changed. However, so far so good. Doesn't look completely drastically destroyed. Definitely some signs of overheating. Definitely needs cleaning and some repair. However, it should be okay again. I did want to add an additional side note really quick. The technique I'm going to use to create an external speaker jack here is, if you see here, this is the actual cable going to that external speaker jack. So there is another cable that is connected with this small X kind of connector here, and then on the other end it's connected to the speaker right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely disconnect that speaker on the other end of the speaker, use this, click this back in, and then just drill a hole and solder in a new jack, wired exactly the same, and then that way we'll have 2 external speaker jacks. see, the transformation of this board so far has been night and day. So this is the side that has been completely, everything has been replaced with those nice MJ15024Gs. All of the transistors went in perfectly. Here are the new resistors as well, the new P600D, and then 47 ohm resistor with a 502 cap right there. So this is the other side. We're going to get all this removed and everything replaced, and we will go ahead and show the final product once it's done. We are on the final assembly of the Combo 300 power board for Dan from Cavity. We're getting ready to put everything together, but I just wanted to show something interesting. So with these PV caps here, these large can capacitors, so you might get, you know, average amp tech that might not deal with a lot of vintage gear, might get intimidated at, you know, looking at these cap cans that have all these different connectors on here. And I was trying to find a specific cap that I could just put right into the existing holes, and that was not going to work. So I could not find any regular snap-on capacitor can that would go right in. So what was interesting, and that was through the biggest distributors, Mauser and DigiKey and any other usual large capacitor and trusted source. So with these large capacitor cans, this is not a multi-section can, it's just a single can. It's a 5,000 microfarad at 55 volts. So with these 4 outer connections here, the ones on the edge, that's just a grounded connection to the can itself. So that's just, those are like mounting pins basically, for example. And then these here, these 2 middle pins are what actually is the positive and the negative. So as you can see with the shape here, the half moon shape is a positive, and then the negative is the triangle. So half moon positive there on the left hand side, and then triangle is negative. So the one capacitor that I could find that wasn't $20 plus on any source was these Nippon Chemicon caps here, these 5,000 at 100 volts. You can always boost the volts, doesn't hurt, can always help. And then especially in large power supplies like something like this, like a Combo 300, or, you know, the Peavey BH 400 BH style power sections. So these caps, ironically, usually, you know, snap-on capacitors have 2 connections. That's it. You know, negative indicated by the stripe, and then positive here on the other side. But these are kind of like this. It's like the newer version technically, and it has this style connection, right? So I was kind of racking my brain and trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get these caps in these sockets on the board? You know, that's the ideal situation, is to put them right on the board. Or I would have to, you know, hardwire a couple of leads here and then try to find a secure spot in the chassis to then include some kind of connector or clip or adapter to then, you know, screw into the chassis itself and stabilize the caps, so that way they don't go flying somewhere and then heat shrink the connections and everything. It was going to be a whole mod job, right? That was going to take probably at least an hour. So I, you know, trying to rack my brain and everything, doing some measurements and millimeters and stuff like that. Once I remove these cans, you have these 4 connections here. Like I said, these are the outer ground connections. They're not really needed. With these capacitors, what you see here, these 2 middle connections, that's the negative, that's the positive. These 2 serve kind of the same exact purpose that these 4 do as well. So that's the mounting, you know, grounded kind of connections, right? So these original holes here, this one and this one, it would not fit in between. But I did realize that these 2 mounting snaps and the negative, when put into this hole, were matching. So I decided, oh, okay, I could just make basically kind of like a copper tape patch here to cover this hole. Then, and, you know, also cover these 2 other mounting connections. This trace was removed. It just completely fell off when I took the other can out, but I'll replace that with a copper tape patch. But then I was able to drill a hole here in the same trace to create a snap-in hole for this positive lead. So then I was able to finally get one of the caps mounted straight onto the board, and then I can RTV that up and make sure that it is 100% solid with really, really dense connection of solder, and that's going to work perfectly fine. I mean, that is going to work excellent. It's going to snap right in just like that, and then it's perfectly flush onto the board. And then also it cut a lot of the height too. I mean, it pretty much cut the height in half. And they're larger 100-volt capacitors that can take more voltage, so which means they're going to be safer. It's pretty much double the voltage of this. So it's going to be safer with the same capacitance and the same orientation on the same board. It's going to end up working out excellent. So let's continue on with this build and keep it going.
Are they insane?
Insane? No. Psychotic? Yes.
So ended up replacing and then resoldering some caps here on the front board. All of the knobs, all of the jacks were sprayed with deoxit and lubed. Everything's working perfectly. This is one of the power boards here. This is like the secondary preamp board here. Obviously, you see recapped completely with new film caps and electrolytics. And then here's the bread and butter. This is the main power board here. So make sure to double check your orientations of your capacitors. I looked at the boards on the opposite end. So when I was looking at photos, I was looking at from this perspective, whereas I should be looking at it just like this from the forward perspective. And I reoriented these capacitors incorrect. So when I, initial power up, I was blowing the fuses here. And then I realized that a couple of these caps had blown. These are some nice power caps that I replaced. And then these are the main power filter caps. As you see, all these red filter caps were replaced, main diodes, these diodes. I made sure to do everything I could to make sure that this amp worked and that this amp's going to be reliable. So as you can see, there's been extensive work done on this board for sure. And then all these new resistors and everything. Okay. And then let's go ahead and flip it. Well, first I'll show you what I did here. This bridge rectifier connection here was a little shoddy. Had two, these are odd impedance resistors here. These are 221 ohm resistors. So it literally had these soldered in to this terminal, and then it had one of these exposed bare terminal clips here without the actual crimp on it, and it was just soldered on. So I ended up, making a much more secure connection with newer resistors. That way this doesn't have to, you don't have to worry about this ever again. Went ahead and created a better version of the same thing, and went ahead and replaced that. That way we're solid there. Reworked the power cable and the fuse holder, and that way that's solid. And then the pièce de résistance. Let's go ahead and flip this. Okay. So what we're gonna do is slowly try to take a look at, try to zoom out here. All right, we're gonna take a look at this power board here. So as you can see, this board was completely gutted. It has brand new P600D diodes, which was, these diodes were shorted, and these are the large power diodes. That's what was shorting the 8 amp fuse on the back, is that these diodes were shorted because this board was completely dirty. For some reason, Peavey put the vent right above the transistors, which are extremely important. So any moisture, any dust, or anything like that was going, falling right through these holes and going right onto the integral power board here with the transistors on them. So these are those beautiful 500 or 15204Gs. And they just came out fantastic. I mean, this board came out fantastic. It looks wonderful. These resistors are looking great. Capacitors looking great. 2 new 47 ohm resistors right there on the board. And everything was cleaned up and sprayed. And then finally, this is the installed external speaker jack, since it's no longer going to be a combo. So I'm going to follow it to the end. You're going to be able to see the actual combo itself and the external speaker put into a cab by my buddy James. And this baby's gonna roar again with Dan from Cavity, and hopefully if you guys are in Florida, you'll be able to get the privilege of seeing it live in action. So let's go ahead and get it finalized.